it's Leela, the proud poly kinky queer slut. Today's question is, how is trauma stored in the body? I'm going to tell you a few stories about interesting things that I learned when processing my trauma disorder, my PTSD, and how that affected my body. So, and what I learned about my body and what my body can tell me about what's going on with my brain. So, uh, Complex PTSD is it's an interesting kind of malady because, and I use air quotes for that, because PTSD is actually the result of your brain behaving exactly how it's supposed to in traumatic situations. So it's literally the processes your brain uses when there is a time of crisis. You know, the fight, flight, freeze, fawn responses. Um, it's actually your healthy process for protecting your brain when you're in those situations, and protecting your body too, helping you physically have the strength, endurance, mental capability to persist in dangerous situations. So it's interesting because what we suffer from, it's I like the analogy of like a common cold, right? So the virus is the problem, like the thing that's attacking, like in a trauma situation, the thing that's creating the trauma for you is the problem. But the symptoms we feel are the result of, in a cold, are the result of our immune system reacting in a healthy way. So we sneeze and we have a fever and we have our cough and all of that stuff because of our immune system reacting to the invasion of the virus. And in the same way, we have post-traumatic stress disorder symptoms, and we have these like adrenaline responses and all of these things happening in our body as a result of reacting to that external threat. But a lot of those feelings are happening in our bodies that are the result of our natural processes. And I really like the immune system analogy when it comes to PTSD a lot. Like there, and I'm sure I'll talk about this more later. So I'm going to move on from that. So because our brain and body are connected, and the your fight, flight, freeze response systems are what they're doing is they're dumping chemicals into your body. They're regulating your hormones, your endorphins, all of these chemicals that produce feelings in your body. One thing that they're also doing is to like those chemicals, those same chemicals are changing your perception of events. So there's a reason why it's really hard to talk about trauma, and that's because those chemicals that happen in that traumatic experience actually suppress speech function. And then in PTSD, what's happening is that those are coming back up again. So you're not faced with the stressor, but your body and your brain think you are. So they're giving you that trauma response, that stress response, when there isn't that stimuli, based on another stimuli that's similar, or it's just locked in a pattern in you. So what can happen is you develop things in your body because there's this disconnect between what you're perceiving in your brain that's being affected by the chemicals and what's happening in your body. And it is helpful for our brains to not be fully cognizant and remember all the details of a lot of those super horrible, stressful situations. So what happens is you cannot even realize what's going on, but your body knows. So some ways that this has come out for me. So, still something I'm actively working on. I'm going to tell you a story from this week of something I'm actively working on. These things happen less and less to me, but they still come up once in a while. And when they do, I try to welcome and embrace them and work through them. And, I have good therapy and I've got good support systems, and I'm very, very fortunate about that. But they still happen. PTSD is a chronic condition. It doesn't go away. It gets well managed. So this week I had one where I was realizing I was having nightmares. I was just tense, realizing I was having like aches and pains all over my body because I was just tensing up and holding all sorts of tension. And I didn't know what was going on with that. I wasn't sure what that feeling really was. And so I did a little bit of unpacking, and I like getting in touch with anger is a problem for me. It's a challenge for me. So I was like, well, what if this is anger? So I got out a pillow and I started punching it, and I got out my flogger and I started flogging that punching bag and just screaming, just like letting anger out to see what was what was coming up. And I don't know what triggered this exactly, but to a certain degree, that wasn't the important question for that. So as I let that anger out, as I went through the motions of expressing anger, even though my brain was like, am I really angry? I don't know. But I went through the motions of expressing anger. And then so punch the pillow, scream, stop. What's going on in my body? And it was like, oh yeah, I am angry. I was able to feel that, like, oh yeah, this is consistent with what my body is doing. But then immediately I got this like rush of fear and this like specific physical memory of not being able to breathe, like this, like, and so that tells me that what was actually stopping up my emotions was not being irritated or angry. It was the fear. It was the trauma response of having been angry and then been made afraid of that, and that shutting down the anger. And this is an old pattern. This is something that probably comes from early childhood for me. But because I was able to follow that in my body, go from like, okay, well, I'm probably angry. I'm recognizing first, I'm holding all this tension, I'm doing these things, I'm having these bad dreams. That's a symptom that for my body means I'm likely angry. And I know that from lots of therapy, lots of good therapy. And then taking that and then going to okay, well, let's act that out. Let's do those movements. And then from there, you get to discover something about yourself. And then what happens then is it's not immediate, but for me, once I saw what my body was trying to show me, once I saw that like the angry was actually afraid, and afraid of a specific memory, a specific thing, then my brain was able to kind of put those feelings on the right time and date stamp. So one thing that happens, one analogy I like to think of with PTSD is that the brain does not time date stamp those memories. So they're kind of free floating and they come back, and they're physical memories, not like what specifically happened, but it's a time date stamp error in the brain. So they're kind of just popping up randomly. And that allowed my brain to kind of go through the practice of time date stamping those feelings. And then over the course of the next couple hours, those feelings subsided in my body and I was much calmer and I was much able to go about my life. So yeah, it's different for everybody, but yeah, our body holds stuff and our body like remembers things, and it creates this disconnect, and going through the motions of working through the body and becoming at home in the body, paying attention to your body, and observing what feelings are happening in your body that may be different from the feelings that are happening in your brain, allows you to work through those things. So there is a really good book on this that's a little old at this point. It came out, I think, in 2014, that I will link to in the notes. It's The Body Keeps the Score. There's also a lot of good stuff going. I don't know much about somatics, except that like in general, it's dealing with this kind of thing. So I'm not going to link to any reference about that, because from what I understand, there are some really good things out there and some really not so good things out there. And I don't know enough to know the difference, because that's not how I came to it. But yeah, The Body Keeps the Score, I'll definitely link to. And one final thought is that this isn't just people with PTSD. This is something that happens in the brain and body normally, because again, PTSD is just kind of an overfunctioning of an already healthy system, healthy response. And so people have these healthy responses and things get stuck in the body where you're holding the tension here or there, and all the time. I mean, it's something that like a lot of people deal with. I mean, I would say everybody, but I don't know that for a fact. So I'll just say most people deal with this in some form or another. So if you've got something that's a chronic thing in your body that's bugging you, that brain-body connection, it might be worth looking into. And certainly for me, it has been huge for me to put this together and really like work on these things, from the perspective of body and mind being inextricably linked, because the brain is the chemical factory for the body. So thank you very much for listening. This is Leela, the proud poly kinky queer slut. You can ask me anything by emailing me at kinkyqueerslut@gmail.com, and have a great day. Proud Polly Kinky Queer Slut is art. It is made for entertainment purposes only. I am not a subject matter expert on any of the topics discussed. Please do not rely on anything presented here as fact. Think for yourself, do your own research, make your own decisions. To submit a question, please email kinkyqueerslut@gmail.com.